The first time it happened, I convinced myself it was a coincidence. The second time, I told myself the same thing. By the fifth time, I had started sleeping with the light on and my phone in my hand, and I still hadn't told a single person what was happening. That's the part one think about now, that I had so many opportunities to say something out loud, to make it real and let someone else carry a piece of it. And I didn't, because every individual incident on its own sounded like nothing. That's the trap. My name is Renata. I'm 29 years old. I live alone. Until about 7 months ago, I was in a relationship with a man named Derek. Derek was not violent. I want to be very clear about that, because I think when people hear a story like this, they want a villain they can recognize, and Derek didn't give you easy material. He never raised his voice. He never broke anything. He was attentive in a way that felt like love for probably the first 8 months, and then started to feel like surveillance. He kept a note in his phone called inconsistencies, things I'd said that didn't match other things I'd said. He showed it to me once, during an argument, like evidence. There were 43 entries. I ended things in February. I told him by phone because I was afraid of his stillness more than I would have been afraid of his anger. He listened. He said, "Okay." He said he understood. He said, "You're going to miss how well I know you." I changed my number the next day. I deleted my Instagram. I moved out of the apartment we'd been sharing and found a studio in a neighborhood on the other side of the city. I was careful. Well, I thought I was. The first incident was a Tuesday morning in April. I'd stopped at a coffee cart near my office, one I'd only been to twice before. The woman behind the counter, maybe 25, had a nose ring and a very direct way of looking at people. She made my latte and slid it across the counter and said, "There you go, Ron." I stopped. No one calls me Ron. I hadn't introduced myself. I'd paid on my phone with a different account. The name on that account was my middle name, not Renata, and definitely not Ron. I asked her how she knew my name. She blinked at me. She said, "I'm sorry." I asked her again. She looked genuinely confused. She said she didn't know, that it just came out, that she was sorry if it was weird. I took my coffee. I walked half a block before I had to stop and stand still for a minute. I told myself it was a coincidence. Rin isn't that unusual. She could have heard it somewhere. 3 weeks later, I was waiting for the elevator in my office building when the man beside me, someone I'd seen maybe twice in the lobby, turned and said out of nowhere, "Derek said you be doing that." I looked at him. He was looking at his phone. I said, "Excuse me?" He looked up. His expression shifted. Not quite guilt, not quite surprise. He said, "Sorry, did I say that out loud?" I was texting. The elevator arrived. He got on first. I didn't get on. I stood in the lobby for a while after the doors closed. I was thinking if it were the Derek I know, what had the Derek said I had been doing? Checking my watch? Looking toward the stairwell? Nothing. I called my friend Mara that night and tried to describe it. Halfway through, she said it sounded like he was just a weird guy talking to himself. I agreed. I stopped telling the story. May was quieter. I started to relax. Then in June, I was at the laundromat on a Saturday afternoon, folding shirts at one of the long tables, when a woman sat down at the other end. She wasn't doing laundry. She didn't have anything with her. She just sat. After about 10 minutes, she said, without looking at me, "You said you fold clothes like you're trying to iron them flat." I put down the shirt I was holding. I said, "What?" She looked at me directly. Her eyes were completely calm. She said, "Sorry, were you talking to me?" She smiled and took out her phone. I left my laundry in the dryer and walked home. That detail, the way I fold clothes, was something Derek had said to me once. A specific observation, phrased in a specific way, during a moment in the kitchen on a Sunday morning the previous fall. I had forgotten it. He clearly hadn't. I spent most of that night sitting at my kitchen table trying to build a theory that wasn't the obvious one. I want to explain the obvious theory, because I'm still not entirely certain I'm right. What if Derek had found people, paid them or convinced them, or found some network of strangers willing to participate, and fed them details, specific observations, private phrases, the way I fold laundry, which coffee cart I'd started visiting, not to threaten me directly, not to follow me in the traditional sense, just to remind me, through other people's mouths, that he was watching, that he knew, that no matter how far I moved or how carefully I disappeared, some version of his knowledge was already out there in the world around me, embedded in strangers, waiting to surface. I know how it sounds, but the alternative is that 3 separate people in 3 separate locations over 2 months independently surfaced Derek's exact language by coincidence, and I've been a project manager long enough to know that coincidence stops being a reasonable explanation at a certain point. I made a mistake in July. I'd been in contact with Derek's younger brother, Theo, who I'd always liked. I reached out to tell him what was happening, not to start trouble, just because Theo was the kind of person who might know something and might actually tell me. He called me back the same night. He said Derek was in the city. He said he'd left his marketing job in the spring and had been doing consulting work, mostly remote. He said Derek had mentioned me once or twice, that I'd changed my energy, and that he hoped I was doing well. I asked if Derek had ever mentioned anything about networks, about online communities, about coordinating with other people. Theo went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What kind of communities?" I said I didn't know exactly. Another pause. Then, "Renata, there was a period a few years ago, before you guys met, when Derek was deep into some forums. I thought it was productivity stuff. I didn't look too closely." He stopped. Then he said, "He kind of scared me, actually. I should have said something." I asked what the forums were about. He said, "I genuinely don't know, but it involved coordinating people. They had tasks." He talked about it like it was a game. I filed a police report in August. The officer who took it was professional and listened carefully and told me there was nothing she could cite as a crime. No threat had been made. No law had been broken. She documented everything. She suggested I consult an attorney. I installed a camera in my apartment that night. 2, actually. One pointed at the front door, one in the main living space. I started writing down every incident with a date, location, exact words used, and a description of the person. I have 12 entries now. The most recent one was last week. I was in the park 2 blocks from my building, sitting on a bench eating lunch, when a man jogged past and slowed just slightly as he came level with me. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. But as he passed, he said very clearly, "Still eating at noon exactly." He was gone before I could react. I don't eat at noon exactly. I eat around noon. But Derek used to say that, mockingly. "You're so precise, noon exactly," because I was often running a few minutes late for lunch, and he thought that was funny. Nobody else has ever said that phrase to me. I'm telling this story because I don't know what else to do with it. I've told my sister. I've told 2 friends. I've told a therapist who was thoughtful and careful and did not dismiss me. None of them know what to do either. Maybe I am starting to sound crazy, but I swear I am not crazy. Derek has never once contacted me directly. No texts, no calls, no messages. There is no evidence in the traditional sense of anything. Just strangers. Just language. I don't know how many people are involved. I don't know if they're being paid or if this is something else entirely. I don't know if it will stop or if it will escalate. What I know is that I've started flinching when strangers speak to me. Not out of fear exactly, but out of a specific kind of alertness. Waiting to hear which word will be his. Last Tuesday, a woman in the elevator smiled at me and said, "Long day?" I said yes. She said, "Tell me about it." And for a full 3 seconds, I stood there in silence, parsing her face for something I couldn't name. She was just making conversation, I think. The week I moved into my new apartment, someone had already been living in it. I didn't know that yet. I just knew the place was cheap, available immediately, and only 4 blocks from my new job. The landlord, a retired school principal named Mr. Addo, seemed straightforward. He handed me the keys on a Saturday morning, told me the previous tenant had left in a hurry, and wished me luck. I didn't ask what left in a hurry meant. I should have. The apartment was a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a 6-unit building in East Nashville. 1 bathroom, hardwood floors, a kitchen that smelled faintly of cumin. My furniture didn't arrive until Monday, so I slept on an air mattress the first 2 nights. completely alone in a space that echoed when I breathed too loud. I was 31, recently transferred from Cincinnati for a project management role I wasn't totally sure I deserved. I didn't know anyone in Nashville. My sister lived in Atlanta. My closest friend was a 4-hour drive from here. The first odd thing happened Sunday morning. I had just finished making coffee with a press I'd packed in my carry-on and was passing the entrance of the bathroom when I noticed a toothbrush in the bathroom. I'd already done a walkthrough with Mr. Addo, so I assumed it was mine, but when I checked, mine was still in its case inside my toiletry bag. I threw the toothbrush away and didn't think much of it. Cleaners probably missed it. Monday came. Furniture arrived. I'd built my bed frame, ate takeout pad thai on the floor, and slept well for the first time in a week. Life was organizing itself. Then on Tuesday evening, around 9:30, I noticed a smell. It came from the hallway closet, the long, narrow one near the front door that I'd been using to stack moving boxes. It wasn't strong, more like the closed-up smell of a room that hadn't been ventilated. Slightly sweet, slightly off. I opened the closet door and let it air out for an hour, then forgot about it. Wednesday, I came home from work to find the kitchen cabinet above the refrigerator open. I had never opened that cabinet. I'd barely looked at it. When I checked inside, there were 3 things: a can of chickpeas, a box of protein bars with 2 bars missing from the sleeve, and a single brown prescription bottle with the label torn off. I stood in the kitchen for a long time staring at those items. Then I called Mr. Addo. He said the previous tenant must have left them. He apologized and told me to throw everything out. His voice was patient, calm. I said okay. I thanked him. I hung up. I threw away the chickpeas and the protein bars. I kept the prescription bottle. I don't know why. I set it on the bathroom sink and left it there. Thursday night was when I started paying attention. I'd gone to bed around 11. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I woke up, not from a sound exactly, but from the absence of one. That's the only way I can describe it. I lay there in the dark. The apartment made the usual sounds. Heat kicking on, pipes settling, a car passing outside. And then I heard something that didn't fit any of those categories. From somewhere inside the apartment, there was a very slow, deliberate creak. The kind that happens when someone shifts their weight from one foot to the other on old hardwood. One creak, then nothing. I told myself it was a building. Buildings make noise, old ones especially. I pulled the blanket up and stared at the ceiling for probably 45 minutes before I fell back asleep. In the morning, I found the hallway closet door open. I had closed it the night before. I was certain I had closed it. I called Mr. Addo again. He suggested the latch might be loose. He said he'd send someone to look at it. No one came. The following Monday, I ran into my neighbor across the hall. Her name was Elsa, early 60s, a retired nurse. We introduced ourselves in the stairwell, and she said she was glad to finally meet me. Then she said the last person who lived there never really said hello either. I asked her about the previous tenant. She paused just long enough for me to notice. She said his name was Andrew. He'd lived there about 8 months. Quiet guy, kept odd hours. She said toward the end she'd hear him pacing at night, back and forth, back and forth. She said one morning she knocked on his door because she hadn't seen him in almost 2 weeks, and a piece of mail had been left in her slot by mistake. He answered. He looked thin. She said his eyes were strange, like he was watching something she couldn't see. He was gone about 3 days after that. Elsa said, left everything. I asked what she meant by everything. She looked at me for a moment, then said, Mr. Addo had to get a company to come clear the place out. Took them 2 trips. I thought about the toothbrush, the protein bars, the prescription bottle with the label torn off. I thanked her and went inside. That night, I texted my sister and told her I was having trouble sleeping in the new place. She sent me a relaxation playlist. I didn't tell her the rest. Friday was when I found the mark on the inside of the hallway closet. I'd been looking for an extension cord I'd misplaced in a moving box. I was pulling boxes out one by one, and when I got to the back corner of the closet, I had to crouch down to reach a box near the floor. That's when I saw it, low on the wall, barely 6 inches from the baseboard. A series of short vertical lines scratched into the drywall, grouped in clusters of 5, the kind of marks someone makes to track days. I counted them. There were 63. I sat back on my heels and stared at the marks for a long time. My first thought was that Andrew had made them. My second thought was that 63 days was 9 weeks, and Elsa said he'd been there 8 months before he left. So, what had he been counting? I took a photo. I closed the closet door. I didn't sleep well that night. Saturday morning, I decided to do something I'd been putting off. I went through the apartment carefully, every room, every cabinet, every space I hadn't fully checked since moving in. Behind the bathroom mirror, a half-used stick of deodorant. Inside the bedroom closet, on the top shelf pushed all the way back against the wall, a spiral notebook with a green cover. I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was cramped and slanted hard to the left, like someone writing fast in bad light. The first line said, "Someone comes when the heat shuts off. I've started sleeping with it on." I turned the page, left my keys on the counter, found them inside the closet, didn't put them there, going to ask Addo to change the locks. I turned another page. Addo says the locks are fine. I know the locks are not fine. I stood in my bedroom reading a stranger's notebook, and my hands were completely steady, which surprised me. I think I was still in the part of a bad situation where your brain keeps insisting there's a normal explanation. I read for another 20 minutes. The entries got shorter as they went, more fragmented. At some point, Andrew had stopped writing in full sentences and started writing in lists. Closet again. 3 a.m. Heat off. Smell in hall. Sweet. Don't use the cabinet above fridge. I paused reading at that line. Then I kept going. He has a key. Has to. No other way, and Addo knows. The last entry had no date. It said, "I'm leaving tonight. If you find this, leave too. Don't wait to be sure." I called Mr. Addo on a Saturday morning, which I knew wasn't ideal. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding unsurprised. I told him I found a notebook left by the previous tenant, and I wanted to understand why the unit had been rented without being fully cleaned out. He said he was sorry. He said the cleaning crew was supposed to handle everything me, and said he'd look into it. I asked him for Andrew's last name. He paused and said, "I'm not able to give out tenant information." I asked if Andrew had ever reported problems with the apartment. Another pause, longer this time. He said, "Every tenant has adjustments to make." I said I wanted the locks changed. He said he'd have someone come by next week. I said I wanted them changed today. He said that wasn't possible. I asked him directly if anyone else had a key to my apartment. He said, "Only the spare I keep in the office." I bought a door bar that afternoon, the kind you wedge under the handle. I also bought a cheap motion sensor alarm at the hardware store 2 blocks over, the type that beeps when something passes in front of it. I set it up in the hallway, pointing toward the front door. I did not sleep in the apartment Saturday night. I checked into a Holiday Inn 6 miles away and paid the rate with my own card. Sunday morning I drove back. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. The door bar in place. The motion sensor undisturbed. The closet closed. But the prescription bottle I'd left on the bathroom sink had been moved. It was on the floor, upright, positioned in the center of the hallway, just outside the bathroom door. I picked it up and looked at it. I set it back down on the sink, and I stood there for a very long time doing math in my head. The door bar had been in place. The windows on the 3rd floor were locked. The motion sensor had not triggered. I thought, either something got in and out without disturbing any of that, or someone who was already inside the apartment moved that bottle while I was gone and was still inside when I came back. I left again immediately. I called the police from the parking lot. 2 officers came. They walked the apartment. They found nothing and no one. One of them said the bottle may have been knocked off the sink by vibration from traffic. He said it happens. His voice was very kind. He asked if I'd been under stress recently. I said yes. He nodded like that explained it. I broke my lease 2 weeks later. I lost a security deposit. I didn't fight it. I'm in a different apartment now, 6 miles east. Ground floor, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but the windows face a busy street, and I can see everything from my couch. I've changed every lock. I have a camera at the front door. I found Andrew online 3 months ago, a Facebook profile that matched. a man in his mid-30s who hadn't posted in over a year. His last post was a photo of some food, chicken tikka masala. The comments were full of people asking if he was okay. I sent him a message. It's still unread. The notebook is in a box in my closet. I've thought about throwing it away more than once. I haven't yet. I've worked night security at a chemical plant. I've camped alone twice in the Ouachita backcountry, and I've lived by myself in the same house outside Tulsa for 11 years. I know what this house sounds like at 3 a.m. I know the difference between the furnace clicking on and something else. What happened last October was something else. My name is Calvin. I'm 44. I work in commercial HVAC, which means I keep unusual hours during installation season. Sometimes I'm out by 6 and don't get back until dark. I live on a quarter-acre lot on a gravel road outside of Tulsa, nearest neighbor about 300 yards west. The house sits back from the road by maybe 60 feet. There's a single porch light on a timer and 2 floodlights in the back triggered by motion. I mention all of this because the layout matters. The Friday it started was the 3rd weekend of October, which is deer season. My neighbor to the west, a guy named Pete who I've known since high school, had permission to hunt a strip of wooded land behind my property. He'd been out there since before dawn that day. I'd seen his truck parked at the gate when I left for a job that morning. I got home around 6:30. Pete's truck was gone. Nothing unusual. I made dinner, watched a little television. Around 8, I went out to the garage to find a socket wrench I needed for a Monday job. The garage is detached, about 30 feet from the back of the house. I got what I needed, came back in, locked the door behind me, and went to bed a little after 10. I woke up at 2:19 a.m., not from a sound, just awake. Suddenly, I lay there in the dark. The house was quiet. The back floodlight, which I can see from the bedroom window if I sit up, was off. Then I heard the crunch of gravel from a front driveway. One vehicle, moving slow, no headlights. I sat up. I listened. The vehicle stopped. I heard the engine cut. Then nothing. 30 seconds, maybe 40. Still nothing. I got up and went to the front window, keeping the side of it so I wouldn't be visible from outside. The porch light was still on its timer. It shuts off at midnight, so the front was dark. I could see the shape of a vehicle at the end of my driveway, a truck or a large SUV, dark colored. No plates visible from that distance. I watched for 2 minutes. No one got out. Then the reverse lights came on, and the vehicle backed slowly out onto gravel road and drove away. I stood at that window for another 20 minutes. Nothing else came. In the morning, I walked the driveway. In the soft shoulder where the gravel meets the grass, there were 2 clear tire tracks, wide tires, something heavy. And about 8 feet from where the vehicle had stopped, in the dirt at the edge of the drive, there were 2 footprints, heel and toe, pointing toward the house. And then nothing, like whoever made them stop walking. I mentioned it to Pete when I saw him Sunday afternoon. He'd been out hunting both days of the weekend and hadn't noticed any unfamiliar vehicles on the road. He said a lot of guys parked on county roads during deer season trespass on private land. It was possible. It was deer season. I filed it under probably nothing and moved on. The next incident was 11 days later. I came home from a long day, left before 6, back after 7, and found my back gate open. The back gate is a wooden frame gate, latched with a simple hook and eye, that leads from the backyard out to the field behind the property. I keep it latched. I am specific about this because when you have floodlights on motion sensors and you leave them unobstructed, you want to know when something is out there. The gate was not just unlatched. It was open a full 45 degrees, and the grass just outside the gate in the field was flattened in a pattern, not trampled randomly, but compressed in a specific way, like something or someone had been crouched there for a while. I checked the back floodlight. Both bulbs were working. I looked at the angle, the way the gate was positioned. It blocked the direct field of view of the motion sensor. Whatever was crouched in that grass wouldn't have triggered the light. I went inside, made dinner, and thought about that for a long time. The thing about living alone on a quarter acre outside of town is that your decision-making works differently than it would in a neighborhood. There's no one to call out to. There's no ambient noise that would cover or reveal something unusual. You learn to trust your own read on a place. My read was starting to say something I didn't like. I bought a trail camera at the farm supply store that week, the kind hunters use. I mounted it on a fence post at the back gate, angled so it covered the gate and about 30 feet of the field behind it. I also started paying attention to the road when I left and came home. For 2 weeks, nothing. Then on a Tuesday in early November, the trail camera sent an alert to my phone at 11:47 p.m. I was still awake. I pulled up the image. There was a man standing in the field behind the gate. He was approximately 40 yards out, at the edge of the camera's range. White male, medium build, dark jacket, facing the house. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there in the dark in a field behind my property at midnight, looking at my house. I called 911. The dispatcher was calm. She stayed on the line. 2 deputies arrived in about 14 minutes, which is decent time for that part of the county. They walked the field with flashlights. They found nothing and no one. No vehicle on the road. No tracks they could follow in the dark. One of the deputies looked at the trail camera image on my phone. He said it was a little dark, but it was clearly a person. He said he'd file a report. He said if I saw it again, call immediately. He also asked if I had any disputes with neighbors or former co-workers. Any idea who might have a reason to be on my land? I said no. I thought about the truck at the end of the driveway in October. I gave them that information. They wrote it down. 2 nights later, at just after 1 a.m., I woke up to a sound on the front porch. Not the creak of a board. Not a sound I could name. More like the air pressure changing slightly. The way it does when a door that's been closed for a while is opened, except no door had opened. I lay very still. I have a pistol in the nightstand. Have for years. Comes with living alone in a rural area. I put my hand on it without taking it out. I listened for 4 minutes. Nothing. Then a soft, deliberate knock on the front door. 3 times, slow. Not the knock of someone urgent. Not the knock of someone lost or in trouble. Measured. Patient. I did not get up. I did not go to the door. I have thought about that decision many times since then, and I still believe it was the right one. I called 911 with my free hand. The dispatcher stayed on. The knocking didn't repeat. By the time the deputies arrived, there was no one outside, but on the front porch, centered perfectly in front of the door, someone had left a single item, a photograph, face down, held flat by a small stone placed in the center. The deputies photographed it in place before they turned it over. It was a picture of me, taken from a vehicle, through a windshield, at what looked like a stoplight. I was visible through the driver's side window of my truck, looking straight ahead. The photo was in color and high resolution. It had been printed, not on regular paper, on photo stock. Someone had printed it specifically. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, it read, "I know your schedule." That was 4 months ago. The investigation is still open. The deputies cross-referenced the tire tracks from October with 2 other reports from the same county road. Both complaints about a slow-moving, dark-colored vehicle with no lights that had been spotted near different properties over the same stretch of weeks. They think it's one person. They don't have a suspect yet. I have a full camera system now. 4 exterior cameras, motion-triggered, feeding to a recorder and to my phone. I also have a dog, a 2-year-old shepherd mix named Rook, who sleeps at the foot of the bed and has, so far, been quiet every night. Pete and I have worked out an informal arrangement where we check in by text at odd hours when either of us is aware of something unusual. I haven't had another incident since November, but here's what stays with me. Not the photograph, not the knocking. What stays with me is the crouched space in the grass behind the gate, the flatness of it, the specific angle that kept it out of the floodlight. Someone had been there before, more than once, long enough to figure out the exact position where they couldn't be seen. They'd done reconnaissance. They'd been patient. And whatever they were planning, something either interrupted it or satisfied it. I still don't know which one.